Okay, so our tests are running, and in our case, they're passing, but we want to run down this failure route. I've actually decided, instead of going to this attempt n, let's actually go directly to this appending new entry to messages array with a retry prompt. And then we'll build in the attempt end. The reason the attempt end exists is because it breaks us out of an infinite loop. But I think for this example, we can actually just work with the infinite loop and we'll build away from it in the next video. So we're running our tests, and if they're passed, great. But what about if they don't pass? So here's where we're going to be building the loop in. A good friend of mine mentioned that what makes it agentic is it's really just a while loop. It just runs infinitely until you give it the reason to break out. In our case, we're just going to make a case whether or not the test passed. So I'm actually going to go up here and say let test passed equals false. And then what we want to do is we want to say while test passed. Let's plug all this in here. So this is now agentic. We have I'm going to move let test pass here. We have our loop. While tests have not passed, we're going to interact with ChatGPT. We're going to write the response to the add.ts and run the tests and then set passed. If we run this, it's creating the file, passes. What happens if we add a test case that is impossible to pass? So let's just say it is impossible. Expect add of 1 and 1 to be 3, right? 1 plus 1 is never going to equal 3. At least it shouldn't. So what I expect here is to actually recreate the add.ts and see how it keeps failing. So now we're in the loop. So if we do an add.ts, we're going to see it's going to keep changing. These are all the new responses from ChatGPT. And it's going to keep changing and trying and failing. Failing because the test really should never pass. But here we are in an infinite loop. So we've made it into the loop. Let's delete this again. Let's run it again. The reason we're not really in the loop here is because it's actually a pretty easy test. ChatGPT knows how to solve this pretty much every single time, so we're not hitting the loop. But in more advanced test cases, more advanced functions that you're testing, you're probably going to hit the loop more often. But we're just looping. We're not doing anything with this test output. So that's where our messages array comes in. What we want to do here is push to messages. We're going to say roll system, and we're going to create something called a retry prompt. We'll just say tests are failing with this output. Try again. We'll do 2 new lines, and then we're going to give it the test output. So if you remember, test output is all these error messages. If there's any errors, or if we don't pass, basically if the tests don't pass, it's going to pass all of these failure messages over to the LLM. So in this case, I'm going to just console.log messages so you can see how it changes. This probably isn't going to get into the agentic loop, but you're still going to see the adjustment. So here's our messages. And here we have the original prompt that we passed it. In this case, this is our test spec file. Then we have our base prompt that we add onto it. And then we're actually adjusting. We're building, this is the test output. And we're saying tests are failing with this output, try again. In this case, actually, our tests aren't failing, but we've already broken out of the loop, so it's fine. So now we're appending our new entry to messages array with our retry prompt. So now every time the test fails, it just keeps adding onto our messages, extending the context that the AI model is actually really good at handling. So we have our agentic loop. We're good. Our only problem now is infinite. So the last step in this video is actually going to be adjusting it for a maxed attempt. So I'll see you then.